Yeah. Needed. I think Mike having stopped us on maybe ride that momentum, because following in the guidance and footsteps of my co-chair, I want to start on time, not get known for being late. That's going to fix my other reputation. So I think I know most of you. Gareth Davis, co-chair of OREF, and yeah, thank you for coming along tonight. This is Hardcore OREF, I think, on such a lovely night. Do we have anybody online as well? No. So we have a Hardcore OREF here then. Yeah, really delighted that you've come out tonight. And as is the way with these magnificent men who do the technology, we're going to have a video of this for posterity, so other people that haven't been here tonight will be able to see it. And what we're going to be treated to tonight is a kind of review of a really exciting initiative that really started back in the early days of Reflex, and Anna's going to explain a bit more about the origins of that. And this is Anna. I'm actually, really delighted that Anna's got a chance to speak about her work that she's been doing. Anna came to Orkney about 7 years ago now, say.
August 2019.
Yeah. So, but after a really interesting career in the BBC as a producer, in the building trade, and also in communications for various organisations, became with a whole bunch of skills, and then picked up some new skills from ICIT. And then we were delighted that she became part of the Reflex project. And many of you would have been involved with Reflex on the EV side, or maybe on the house improvement side. And Anna looked after the office side of that, and her experience of customer care and communications was really great for that. And on the back of that is the ideas and the concepts that she's going to talk about now. So I'm not going to steal your thunder and let you explain it, but I'd like to hand over to Anna to take us through the Rural Energy Hubs project.
Thank you, guys. Well, I'm Anna Marriott, project manager for the Rural Energy Hubs project and a senior consultant with Aquaterra. And the Rural Energy Hubs project is really been very much a place-based project. And this, as we all know, is our place, wild and wonderful, raw natural power of Orkney and Shetland. It brings us a lot of opportunities, like the test centres with EMEC, that make us a global hub for renewable energy development and for innovation projects in decarbonisation, like this one. It also brings us a lot of challenges. It's wonderfully dramatic picture, but this is a classic example of our housing stock in Orkney and Shetland, detached, exposed, with multiple extensions of different types of building fabric, and a standardised approach to retrofit of buildings doesn't work very well up here, as we all know. And these are some of the problems we're looking to address in the project. So the project partners for Rural Energy Hubs were split across Orkney and Shetland, Aquaterra, Community Energy Scotland, Orkney Islands Council and EMEC here in Orkney, and then in Shetland Islands Council was the fifth project partner. Then in Shetland also, that's where we set up the Bray Rural Energy Hub, which is the pilot Rural Energy Hub established during the project and very much the flagship of our project. And before I get into a bit of background, first, I just want to sort of give you a bit of a picture of what we mean by a rural energy hub. So if you imagine somewhere that is warm, welcoming community centre, where individuals and businesses and even staff from local authorities can come in and learn about and access clean energy solutions from friendly local energy advisors. This is really the core concept around the Rural Energy Hub that we're talking about, and I'll get into that in a bit more detail. But first, I'm going to give a broader background on this project than I normally do, because I know the folk in OREF know about more about the history of innovation projects in Orkney than audiences I normally speak to about projects. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on this stage than I normally would before I get into the hub itself, but I will get there, I promise. So this project is funded by the Innovate UK Net Zero Living Programme, which was a two-staged programme. First, we did a feasibility study back in 2023, and then we've done a 2-year demonstration project, which has just come to its end. And this whole programme, which involved, it was overall a £60 million programme funded by the UK government, and it was about 50 projects around the UK. And a lot of the ideas out of it came out of learning from the previous programme, PFER, the Prospering from the Energy Revolution programme, which funded Reflex Orkney. And the thing Innovate UK learned was that it's not just the technology that's the challenge of decarbonisation, it's the non-technical barriers of the things they were seeing on, because normally Innovate UK funds technical innovation projects, and they realised that lots of these things like finance, regulation, resources, behavioural change, lack of data, all these sorts of non-technical issues blocking projects that they've been funding. And so this whole Net Zero Living programme was set up specifically to address that, which I think is a really special thing, because normally, as we all know, on these kind of projects, you get funded in future to take forward the things that worked, not to have another go at the stuff that didn't work. But that's exactly what this funding has been about, is trying to figure out how to overcome these. And for me, having gone from working on Reflex Orkney, where we worked incredibly hard, but were not able to complete quite a number of the deliverables we set out to do because of regulations and funding, all these non-technical issues that got in the way. With the Rural Energy Hubs project, we've actually been able to deliver everything we set out to do. Not that we didn't have challenges and things that were difficult and to overcome, but this approach of trying to look at how do you overcome these non-technical issues is what this has been very much about. As I say, we had the project partners I've already mentioned, but the funders required us to have different types of partners in the project. So you had to have local authority partners, you had to have at least one small or medium enterprise, you had to have community representation, and you had to have research and innovation as part of it. So we needed all of the different types of organisations we had to our partners. And then obviously we were able to draw on the long history of collaboration we have on all these different projects, the types of projects that we've done before together. So looking at the phase 1 that we did, the feasibility work we did at the beginning in 2023, this was actually 2 projects at that stage, one in Orkney and one in Shetland. And they were about 70 grand each, those projects, so small 3-month projects. And in Shetland, we did a very focused piece looking at the idea of setting up these community-based rural energy hubs around Shetland. And we did a GIS mapping exercise to figure out where we might put them, and created a sort of long list of 11 potential locations. And then we also did a public consultation talking to people about the types of services they would find helpful and would actually use in a hub if one existed in their community. And then we also did just a bit of a desktop review of other energy hub type programs around the UK to learn from them as well. And that project came up with the recommendation of Bray in Shetland as the location to have that pilot hub if we could get funding to set it up. And then in Orkney, it was a much sort of broader project, because we were looking at, okay, what were the things we couldn't do in a bunch of the previous projects we've done before, and how can we bring together all those non-technical barriers we came up against and try and look at how we'd overcome those. So it was a broader piece we did there for Orkney, but it still drew on things like Reflex Orkney. And a key bit with this funding programme is that in phase 1 there were 30 projects across the UK, but for the feasibility, but for the demonstrator at phase 2 there was only 6. And they encouraged collaboration between locations that had been part of phase 1. And it made sense to us anyway to collaborate between Orkney and Shetland, because, well, Aquaterra and Community Energy Scotland were partners in both projects. So we had that crossover already. And then also they both drew on a lot of learning from Reflex for these 2 projects. So we did that and brought them together. So what we did, looking at the project for the phase 2 demonstrator, which is the main thing I'll talk about tonight, we had just over £5 million in funding altogether for the whole programme. And the concept we were really trying to create with the Rural Energy Hubs model is to provide a place-based, very much community-led approach to overcoming non-technical barriers and also accelerating decarbonisation in rural and island communities, and helping people to reduce both their carbon emissions and their energy bills as well. And we were working across heat, power and transport, and all the different deliverables that we did in the project fell into 3 categories: either services people could come and use at a rural energy hub, services they could take away to decarbonise their home or business, and then also the hub acting as a location on transport routes to help facilitate decarbonisation of transport routes, so having rapid EV charging or other types of alternative fuel at those locations. So let's look at the hub itself. So this is the Bray Youth and Community Centre in Bray. The name is Youth Centre, but it's actually just used as a community centre in Bray and Shetland. And when we first got in touch with them and started looking to work with them, it was a well-used building in the community. Lots of different groups use it, but it was incredibly cold and damp. And so we did a programme through the project to transform the building, to renovate it. And that was both so that it could demonstrate the measures and technologies available for decarbonisation, as well as making it an inviting place for people to use. And the hub is located here alongside the services that are already there in the community, and a new cafe that's also being set up as well. So it's bringing all those different elements together in the one location, which means that the hub doesn't have to start from scratch when you're trying to bring in an audience of people to come and visit, come to the building anyway for their centre or their aerobics or different things. So, or even just to stop into the cafe, which helps you build use of the hub. And a really key aspect of the work that we did here was really the community-led approach that we took, that's been at the centre of our collaboration to set up the project, was working with the centre's committee, and they were all volunteers, and it was amazing how they would come out every 2 weeks for about 6 months. They would do a meeting with us in the evening for a couple hours, working through both how we would renovate their building, to make it fit for purpose, but also what the hub would do and what the community needed. And they were just a fantastic group of people that we worked with to really have the idea of the hub and what it would be come out of that community, and what the needs and opportunities of that community are as well. And you can see here as well, just to look at what we actually did physically to the building. The retrofit included the cladding here that you can see. I was going to skip out. Oh, actually, to mention this one, should have had this up in the last bit I was talking about. So we did a sort of mini master planning exercise, working with Colin Ross Architects, looking at all the different ways the building was used. And we did this with the Bray Youth and Community Centre Committee to really plan out and think through really carefully how the building was used and how it would be adapted through the project. And so we also added on solar and batteries to the building. We installed a large rapid charger for EV charging. We stripped the building inside right back to the walls. We insulated it, upgraded the heating, and then adapted the layout to make room for the new cafe and for co-working space, which you can see that same big open space before has all of these different areas in it now. The co-working space on the top left and the cafe below. And we also did, the centre is due to open very soon. SSE, we're a wonderful DNO, did not install the electricity meter when we'd finished renovating the building back in January, so they did it last week. So we're just waiting to open the centre. We'd hoped to open it 2 months ago, but we're going to be opening it in summer. But we got a few folk to come along and help us take a few pictures ahead of the opening. And another really important aspect to the sort of place-based approach that we've taken here has been building an entirely local team to run the hub long term. So after a really careful governance review, looking at different business structure options, we established a community interest company about a year ago to run the hub long term. And we wanted a business model that could both generate income and also qualify for grant funding. And one of the key learnings from Reflex Orkney has been that there's some things you can do that are services people pay for, and other things that really help behavioural change that aren't services you can charge for. And so having that model that mixes both commercial income and grant funding is really beneficial. And that decision has really been vindicated because we've been able to secure more than £200,000 worth of grant funding from local community benefit funds to support the staffing costs for the next 4 years. So that's been really fantastic. And we recruited a local board of 9 volunteers. There's 6 of them there on the right, to be part of the board, to run the hub. And then in the top left are Jade and Kayla, who are our 2 staff members. They're both certified energy advisors. And then in the bottom left is Carrie, a wonderful local lady who came forward when she heard that we were looking for someone to run the new cafe. And the key thing about all of them is that all of them live in or near Bray, and are really committed to developing their local community and supporting their local communities to decarbonise. And we had what was to me, a really sort of nerve-wracking but also special moment in the project last February on a very dark, rainy, windy Shetland night, where we had an event in Bray to try and recruit members to join the board, because we've obviously done all of this, like a year doing all this preparation and hoping people will want to be part of this, but you don't know until you put yourselves out there. And I was amazed that we've been warned that there was kind of volunteer fatigue in the community and we might struggle to get a full board to start with. But we had a full room of people who came along that night, despite the bad weather and everything, and folk who were really keen to join the board. And we recruited a full board of 9 people from that first night. The thing people said to us was, "Oh, I can really see this. This is something we need in the community." And that was just really fantastic thing to have that response from them. And as I say, they've been running in parallel with the project for the past year, getting things up and running, and have real ownership of it now that the project has come to an end. But we will keep working with them going forward. Now, moving on from, I'm just going to take a wee sip of water for a second. Moving on from what's in the hub to things you can use and take away. We have based at the hub is a location for the Shetland Car Club. And through the project, we funded 2 electric vans. One's actually in Lerwick, and the other one's based at the Rural Energy Hub. And then we also got 5 e-bikes and a big storage shed to charge and store them as well. So both of those are available, and again, feeding into the concept of being a through route on transport, and also encouraging to travel as well. And then looking at services people could take away from the hub, one of the things we trialled here in Orkney, or piloted here in Orkney, was the building retrofit plan, which some of you probably heard about or seen on promotions for over the past couple of years already. And this is really about addressing the need for bespoke approaches to improving buildings. So a building retrofit plan is a much more in-depth analysis of a building than an EPC. So a surveyor comes in, qualified retrofit assessor comes into the property, and as well as doing the sort of checks you'd expect with an EPC, they're also doing things like ventilation tests and FLIR thermal imaging as well, which you can sort of see there, showing your heat loss around the door in that image. And then off the back of that, we produce a report for people which not only gives them an analysis of their building, their home or business premises, but also information on any funding they might qualify for, and crucially, the order in which to do the work, so that you make sure you qualify for all the funding possible. And this is unlike with an EPC, where with an EPC it will take generic recommendations based on your rating of your building. This is very much bespoke to the specific building. And this went really well. We had 29 properties that took part in the pilot, and we got really great feedback from the people who took part, and it's now being offered as a regular service through Reflex Orkney, and it's something that we aim to do longer term through the hub in Shetland as well. Now, another aspect of the project has been around energy monitoring. I don't know if any of you are involved in some of the community buildings that Community Energy Scotland monitors into, but they did a programme testing different types of monitoring devices in community buildings to help them to have sort of better efficiency in their buildings. In Orkney, I think they were mostly based in Orkney, the buildings that they did that in. And then also another aspect we looked at was just what people understand from energy monitoring. And we now are at a point where a lot of people have smart meters, but they may not understand how to use them to get the most out of them in terms of reducing carbon emissions and energy bills. So Community Energy Scotland for the project developed a guide to help people understand better how to do this. And that's something that's now given out for free in the community. Now, this group is a fantastic group that's formed during the project. There are EPUP, or Expert Community of Practice. And these folks are all the development officers from 12 different development trusts across Orkney and Shetland who were sharing knowledge and experience around community transport in their islands. And through the programme, they met monthly online throughout the 2-year project. But they also did lots of in-person meetups where they went and visited each other. And most of the groups were on smaller islands in Orkney and Shetland. And they were sharing their learning and experience around community transport and all writing community transport plans. And the idea behind this was that people with the particularities of small communities, folk know their own community and know what their community needs. So rather than bringing an outside advice, drawing on the knowledge of people within the community. And it's been a really effective programme, and the Bray Hub team are part of that as well, in terms of Jade is sat there in the middle, and it's sort of group that you'd see operating or being part of the collaboration between multiple rural energy hubs. Now, moving on to sort of transport routes and the things we did around decarbonisation of transport routes, we trialled an electric bin lorry in Orkney and an electric bus in Shetland. And the focus of both of these trials was really about trying to de-risk the costs around large mobility vehicles, because as we know, councils are getting more in urban areas. Councils are adopting these vehicles more, but for rural communities where the routes are longer, also up here where it's colder, there's a lot of question about the range and the functionality of them, the ability to make them work with recharging at the depot during lunch breaks and things like that, which in a city where you can have more circular routes more easily makes them more viable. And so what we were looking at doing is trying to really de-risk the cost, because they're double the price of a diesel equivalent vehicle. So for a local authority that's cash strapped, justifying spending more money on one of these vehicles when you're not sure it would actually work in a rural context is a huge non-technical barrier for people adopting. So these 2 trials did a fantastic job of trying them out. So for example, the bin lorry in Orkney did, over the course of the year that we had it trialled all of the bin routes in Orkney, and looking not just technically how to make the range work within the needs of that route, but also how it fit in with the rotas of the staff, their break times and charging facilities. And so there's a lot of really useful learning there. Also, something that I particularly found really fascinating as well was realizing seeing firsthand the difference between the technical readiness of electric vehicles that we use ourselves at home, which are generally work well. I mean, everyone has problems sometimes the charger doesn't work, but generally the infrastructure for charging of electric cars works. But with large vehicles, it's still much more experimental. So with both the bus and the bin lorry, when we ordered the chargers to work with them, which were very high voltage rapid chargers, the specs matched when we ordered them and said they should talk to each other, and a lot of work was done by the procurement teams who bought them. But when they arrived and we plugged them in, they wouldn't talk to each other, and wound up having to have the technicians fly up, and with the case of the bin lorry, it had to go south again and be reconfigured before we could actually get them to work. And that was an interesting learning, that in that larger space, there's still issues just on making things work and with that. So a lot of interesting different bits of learning from that trial as well. I've already mentioned the car club and the e-bikes. Actually, one thing I'll mention actually about the car club as well, which I think folk here might be interested in, is a comparison between the car club model in Shetland and what we did in Orkney here with Co-Wheels. So they're trying out a different, as many of us probably know, the car club here in Orkney just shut down because it just wasn't getting enough use. And so Co-Wheels has put a plug on it, unfortunately. But that was a model based purely on people coming in and using it as individuals. Whereas what they've done in Shetland is the council has partnered with Enterprise Car Club, and they're using the car club to run their fleet vehicles for the council. So that means they're driving a lot of usage through the car club just from all the fleet vehicles for the council, but then also making the vehicles available for the public to book through the car club as you would normally. And then having some vehicles that are just for public use. And that model has, so far, it's been going for about 2 years now, and it's actually keeping going. That piece of work is going beyond the Rural Energy Hubs project, because we just funded one part of it, of putting in electric vehicles, but it's doing all the council vehicles. And they'll be doing that trial for another year, and it's going to be really interesting to see whether that provides a viable business model for rural car clubs if a local authority does that. It would be an interesting one actually for OREF maybe next year to get them to come and talk to you about it, because even in their first sort of month or two of operations, when folks in Shetland, we were kind of in a meeting with staff from both Orkney and Shetland in the project, and the folk in Shetland are saying, oh, the usage level so far in the first 2 months has been really low, and then they told us the figures, and we're like, wow, we never, even on our best days with Co-Wheels, we never reach those numbers. That's good, keep going, you know. So yeah, it's been a really interesting one as well. And then also looking at some other examples of facilitating decarbonisation of transport routes. Some of the more sort of experimental parts of the project that we covered were looking at things like drones, a combined heat and power unit at Kirkwall Airport, and electric ferries, which you might think, what does any of that have to do with the Rural Energy Hub? But as we all know, with islands, our flights and ferries are like buses and trains in some parts of the world, and you could easily see a rural energy hub being located places like down at Stromness waterfront, or next to one of the little island airports, where the buildings are sort of co-located together with the different activities. And the things that we did with these and looked at with these, so with the drone, we were considering it as the rural energy hub, potentially being a place for picking up and dropping off items for delivery, and using heavy lift drones to do deliveries between smaller islands within Orkney and Shetland. So things like medical supplies and food and that sort of thing. And because it's an electric drone rather than going with petrol or with aircraft fuel, that's much lower carbon footprint and potentially lower cost. So we did trials of the drone in Shetland for that. Also at Kirkwall Airport, we had a very exciting trial that EMEC did, which was using green hydrogen to trial to run the combined heat and power unit at Kirkwall Airport, which ran for about a week, and it provided heat and power to Kirkwall Airport from the unit. So that was a really exciting, it was a world first trial, but a lot of challenging non-technical barriers they came over with health and safety and regulations, and we almost locked our test window within the project timeframe because it took us a lot of goes to get the approval to get that through. And equally with the drone trial as well, the CAA took a long time to prove us doing the trials of that as well. So that was kind of the non-technical barriers we were trying to address with these. And then with the electric ferries, there's obviously a whole separate project doing the electric ferries in Orkney. The funding was for the ferries. It wasn't for upgrading the piers. And again, that's another non-technical barrier of the scope of innovation projects. They're not interested in, how do you get the cable, upgrade the wiring in a ferry to get electrical charging into a pier. So in this project, it's not very sexy, but it was very helpful and made a big difference to the work with the electric ferries. Is the Rural Energy Hubs project funded upgrading the electrical connections in Kirkwall and Edy piers to help facilitate the trial that's going to be happening later this year. As well. So that's a few of the examples on the transport side. Now, obviously, as I warned you at the beginning, we brought a lot of different ideas into this project. It's been quite a broad project, but all of it has one of those three elements being based in a rural energy hub, services you can take away, or transport elements that could potentially interact with a rural energy hub. And alongside delivering all of this activity, we developed a replication framework for setting up new rural energy hubs around the UK. And that was a key part of the funding, is looking at approaches that could be replicated and done elsewhere. And so we developed this framework and then ran it alongside the project to test it on the project as well. And what it is a very detailed project management process, really, that provides step-by-step route to go through setting up a rural energy hub. And this is where I'm going to try out this little pointer thing Mike showed me before. See if I can do this right. To just show you what we've done. So we've got a 5-stage process altogether, but depending on the state of a community where you might want to set up a rural energy hub, where you might start could differ depending on the location. And the really important thing about the rural energy hub model, and why we call it a place-based approach, is if you were setting up a new rural energy hub somewhere else, it wouldn't look just like what we've done in Bray. Because your starting point is, what are the problems and what are the opportunities of this place? Who are your key stakeholders here in the place you're setting up a new hub? What is, somewhere they might already have a development trust that would be the organization doing it, and you wouldn't need to set up an organization. They might already have a building to use, and you don't need to do that. We've been talking to one community in Shetland where the energy side of the project, they've been trying to get a data center to come and locate in their community to use the waste heat for district heating scheme. So what it might look like and what you'd be tapping into in a particular community would vary in different places. And so the different stages, so the first two, stage 0 and stage 1, are really about project preparation. And for us, it's what we did in the feasibility study 2 years ago. So stage 0 is really doing a community level assessment, looking at what is sort of a long list of where you might want to relocate hubs. And then stage 1 is narrowing that down to your pilot location or locations. And then stage 2 is about actually doing the setup and developing a project to set up a hub. Stage 3 is being operational and running it, and then stage 4 is your post-implementation evaluation for a project. And at every stage, the framework takes the project team through looking at a whole series of different aspects of what you need to do and breaks it down into really a manageable stages of work. So things like who are your stakeholders, what are the roles of the stakeholders, the responsibilities, the engagement strategies for all parties, looking at a flowchart tool that provides a visual aid for assessing project feasibility in different locations. There's a whole load of different aspects that it supports you to look at, from technical to social and economic. And I've got slides that give more detail on that. If people are interested during the Q&A, I can talk about that bit more if people are interested in that. But I've given you quite a lot of information there. So what I'm going to do is just play a little video that we've had done on the project. It does cover some of the things we've already discussed, but it also lets you actually see through video some of the things that we've done. And then we'll have a Q&A off the back of that or anything just.
The Rural Energy Hub's concept is about supporting rural and island communities to reduce their carbon emissions and energy costs. It is very much a place-based approach, and this is our place. The purpose of the Rural Energy Hub project is about supporting the local community to decarbonise and to understand the information that they require to be able to do that and reduce their carbon emissions and potentially their overall energy costs. Orkney and Shetland are places of real natural power and resource. The islands are already a kind of hub for developing innovative projects in the energy space, but we also have some of the highest levels of fuel poverty in the UK. So trying to understand that relationship and trying to improve that relationship, the Rural Energy Hub, is an opportunity to help people understand that process. The Rural Energy Hub project was funded by Innovate UK and was a partnership project across Orkney and Shetland. The project partners were Aquaterra, the lead, Shetland Islands Council, Orkney Islands Council, Community Energy Scotland and DMEC. The pilot Rural Energy Hub was set up in Bray, Shetland, in the Bray Youth and Community Centre, which underwent significant retrofit throughout the project. Our project team worked in close collaboration with the Centre's committee, who are all volunteers, and give a huge amount of their time and effort to make this project a success, and we thank them for that.
We've made a lot of changes to this this building, the Bray Youth and Community Centre here, in that the building was stripped right back to the bare walls, and we've insulated both walls, underfloor. We have put solar onto the roof. We have a battery system to back up that solar, as well as a whole new heating system.
We set the organisation to run the Rural Energy Hub up as a community interest company. We wanted a company that could generate income but also qualify for grant funding, and also a community interest company, the profits have to go back into the community. So I live in Bray, so this is something I'm really passionate about anyway, as being a local person where our hub is based. The staff at the Rural Energy Hub, including myself, are qualified energy advisors, been through training, meaning that we can give advice to people coming in, and we'll have resources available, be able to refer people on and just bring that information in one place for people around increasing energy efficiency in their home and living more sustainably. So at the hub, as well as the energy advice, we have co-working desks for people to be able to work here. We have an electric van through the car club, which is outside the centre, along with an electric charger, so 2 charge points. We also have 5 electric bikes for hire. Those are available year-round. And within the centre, which is already a community space, there's different meeting rooms that we will be able to hire through the day as well. So we've received funding from local organisations for the next 4 years, which will be for staffing costs and some operational costs, allowing us to have staff for 4 years, and that's going to give us a really good stint of time to test the services, see what works, and be able to listen to the community as well and develop things so that it really suits the needs of the community.
The idea of the hub is it creates essentially a community centre where people can come in and speak to expert advisors about how to reduce their carbon emissions and their energy costs. And it's a model that can be replicated in rural communities across the UK and internationally. And in this project, we trialled a whole range of different services and facilities that could potentially be incorporated into or interact with the hub.
The building retrofit plan was a service that was developed by Aquaterra, and it was piloted in Orkney in collaboration with Reflex Orkney. So a qualified retrofit assessor conducts a survey, including tools such as FLIR thermal imaging. The surveyor then goes and produces a full report which details various measures and recommends a roadmap of measures that can be used to decarbonise a home or a business. It also includes funding options and the order in which the work needs to be carried out. The service is now available in Orkney, and we are looking to offer it as an option at the Rural Energy Hub in Shetland.
So as a part of the project, we undertook a feasibility study to look at a district heating scheme in Bray. So the project explored different options for how a district heating system might be put in place. And we have got to the point where we know what a phase one might look like for a district heating scheme to produce kind of zero carbon heat to the public buildings in the area, and how this might be expanded out to the community. And that would be looking to provide decarbonised and low cost heating to the community.
Shetland Car Club started as a council pilot project to help look at fleet issues that the council were having, but has expanded under the guise of this project to be much more community focused, and that actually has delivered 2 additional electric vehicles and the associated chargers for them, one of which is at the Bray Rural Energy Hub itself. The electric bus technology is absolutely viable for Shetland. There's more trials needed, but I think it's just a matter of time until they're implemented. But there are prerequisite works that have to happen first, including strengthening the grid and putting the infrastructure in place to charge them.
Community Energy Scotland led on multiple aspects of the Rural Energy Hub project, one of these being the energy monitoring aspect. One of the project learnings was that even though smart meters are commonplace, people still need more support in understanding how to manage their energy consumption with relation to decarbonisation and managing their bills. So as part of this, CES developed an educational leaflet that guides homeowners or community groups how to investigate their energy use and lower their bills and their carbon footprint. CES set up a network of 12 officers from community development organisations across Orkney and Shetland. This was part of the Expert Community of Practice Network, or ECOP, and what we found is that if you can treat the locals as the experts to produce the plans for that community, then they're adopted more effectively, and then you also don't need to bring in consultants who may not know the nuances of that community.
Another important part of CS role as one of the partners was trying to see how this would be replicable and coming up with like a strategy of how we could use it elsewhere and take it forward. Key to rural energy hubs is the place-based approach, accepting that every place is different. There's common factors we can use and different sort of templates and frameworks, but they work best when in local settings when they're actually designed and built by those locally involved.
Orkney Islands Council's role within the Rural Energy Hubs project was trialling electric refuse collection vehicle and decarbonisation of marine infrastructure. The key learnings from this trial that will be useful for other local authorities or other areas is that we really maximised what was needed. So that's looping back to the infrastructure. So that's a key point in like understanding on what is the minimum needed. So 160 kilowatt charger is large. It showed that using that within this environment, it could work, but it then also showed that we need to invest in more infrastructure around the island, and that then needs to be looked at the technology readiness level of these vehicles. So that's another key thing that then can be passed on to local authorities, because as that improves, you then need to use less or install less infrastructure, so the whole thing then becomes more economical.
Within the drone trials, we designed a network for integrated sustainable community delivery. We actually trialled the heavy lift drone itself. We sought to gather evidence as to what a sustainable delivery network could look like in the future, and all of this really focused on making this sort of lifeline piece of aviation both more sustainable and economically viable to increase development in the island communities. Within the combined heat and power unit trial, we looked to bring a hydrogen CHP to an airport in a world's first to have that kind of unit running on green hydrogen. In order to do that, we worked closely with operatives in the airport to make sure they were comfortable with the technology. We overcame health and safety barriers, and we actually ran the CHP for an extended period of time, providing heat and power to the airport. So the aviation and CHP trials connect rural energy hubs because of the importance of inter-island flights within island communities. Interlinked small airports and flights between them serve very much as trains and buses do within the rest of the United Kingdom. And you can very much see a rural energy hub being based adjacent to an airport where a CHP would be used to provide heat and power, and it could also serve as a location for drone drop-off and deliveries.
Alongside delivering all these varied activities that could potentially be incorporated into rural energy hubs, we have developed a replication framework that provides a very detailed step-by-step process for developing and delivering future rural energy hubs. Project partners, the Bray Hub staff and board believe this is a genuinely place-based approach to developing energy hubs, and are keen to work with other communities that are interested in developing rural energy hubs.
Applause for that, mate. So your production field going out since
Produced by Colin Kelly.
So that's a pretty great introduction to rural energy hubs, and I think clearly the Orkney experience, although a lot of this was happening in Shetland, a lot of it built on our experience, and a lot of it I think relates to here. So if you've got any points, questions, issues you'd like to discuss, then sally forth, and I'll maybe kick off with, maybe it's an obvious question or not, but obviously we chose Bray and put the energy hub in place there, and you touched on some of the things that maybe made that work. On reflection, knowing Orkney as well as you do, and thinking about how we're set up here, do you think that an energy hub could work? And if it was going to work, where or how? What might be the most important things about setting something up? Yeah.
Well, we did actually in the project do the same exercise, sort of the same RadMap GIS exercise that we did in phase 1 for Shetland. We did the same exercise on Orkney in the phase 2 project, and identified 4 potential locations, one being Stromness, another Kirkwall, another up in Doonby, and another down in the Hope, with the idea sort of the 4 corners in the mainland. And we did consider with that, we looked at potentially having hubs in the outer isles, but with the size of population, we thought that might be quite challenging. And that's why with the one with Kirkwall, I mean, normally, like in Shetland, we intentionally excluded Lerwick as a location. The point was to be out with the biggest town. But our thought was that actually having one in Kirkwall that's in a location that's close enough to the Isles Ferries terminal would have something that could then easily serve for people coming into Kirkwall from the Isles was sort of the idea behind that. But that's kind of what we did in the project.
The Moyne Bray, it's just down the road from the community centre.
It's literally on the same site.
Yeah.
So yeah, when we were, it was interesting actually, because in the phase 1 project, we're actually talking to the Bray Hall, because you have this there's the Bray Community Hall, and then next to it is the Yarrow Squad Shed, and then next to that is the Bray Youth and Community Centre, which you can probably tell from that building, it's one of those wonderful, it was a temporary school annex in the 1970s that then got shored up badly. This is why the renovation got more complex than we thought it would. But yeah, the hall, we spoke to the hall committee originally about doing it, and when we were doing the feasibility in phase 1, they were interested in being the location, but then they decided that actually their building is so well used in the community, because I don't know if you've been in it, but it's quite a beautiful building inside. And from the outside, it looks like quite a bog standard building, but inside it's beautifully done with wood and with amazing views out to the sea. And it's actually used as a venue for weddings and funerals, and it's sort of the main venue in the community for those kind of bigger events. And they decided also that they felt that the building was in pretty good nick already and didn't really need an upgrade, so they told us to talk to the BYC next door because their building was in a dire state, and they were delighted to do it. And so that's how we wound up with that. So even that selection was, the community decided which building between these different groups where they thought it should be.
Well, the hall still does all the things like the brownies and that sort of thing in there, yeah.
Yeah, so the bigger things happen in there. The BYC tends to be, so it's the youth club meets in there, the toddlers group. There's quite a few different exercise classes because it's got an actual gym hall on it because it used to be part of a school. The things like the local AA, the menopause group, bereavement group. There's quite a few different scouts use it. So there's quite a few folk between.
In the hall.
That's in the Bray Youth and Community Centre, the building that the hub is co-located with all those other activities. Whereas the hall has some of the bigger venue events. So they have a lot going on in that village. They've got two venues. Yeah.
It's interesting, that dynamic of and this is one of the things we were talking about a few weeks ago, is if you set yourself up to deliver only one thing, whatever happens to that thing determines the success or the failure of the hub. Whereas I think one of the lessons that we've been able to embrace here is that if you can bring together some compatible things. So, for example, evening activities, the hub and place of advice and connection is probably more of a daytime place. So can you mix daytime activities of that with evening activities? I was just thinking actually as we were speaking, so in Stromness, the men's shed, or the boat, whatever, traditional boat society place, and the old herring factory, is that, I'm not advocating it, but it's a place where.
I was just going to say, what about the community centre just down here? They were asking for suggestions for it the other day, weren't they? They were asking people to come forward and put forward.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we found in Shetland that was really interesting is they have almost have too many community buildings, which is an odd problem to have. But during the sort of initial stages of the oil boom, one of the early community development funds was giving money to community groups for buildings. So lots of community groups all over Shetland put their hands up, and it's very common in quite small villages to have 3 or 4 community buildings that are all run by volunteers. And when we met with woman who's the officer for voluntary action Shetland, she said she spends 3/4 of her time is spent helping these community groups figure out how to look after and manage these buildings, and they often wind up struggling to keep committee members because people get so fed up of how to deal with these old buildings. And so we thought, well, that's a great opportunity for something like this. You don't want to go and create a new building. You want to make use of a resource that's already there. And these buildings were sort of a legacy of that. Sorry, the question.
The buses and the refuse collection, did you actually look at any modelling it through life for the equipment and the systems and how it would work with ageing and less efficiencies? And
there was a lot of modelling done, and we were also able to, because of being part of the Net Zero Living programme, every month we met up with projects from across the UK who were part of the programme. And so we actually, I think it was with Dundee and possibly Nottingham, I forget, one of the cities down south that has had electric buses for a while. They actually shared their data with Orkney Islands Council to compare their usage of electric bin lorries with what we were experiencing up here. And we did quite a bit of modelling looking at the sort of longer term usage of those. I mean, for the bin, if you're interested in the buses particularly, that Shetland Islands Council has actually published the report that they did on the bus trial, so that's available on their website as well. So that they did look at
just
that.
on that point. Is there a project website that some of the outputs are accessible on, or is that not?
Yeah, they're almost at the moment. There's the first version, the project version of the Bray Rural Energy Hub website is live at the moment, but it's waiting till we open the building to shift to the long-term version, which is a much bigger website that will have things like that on it. But we're not kind of promoting it yet because we're waiting for the Bray Hub to be open before we do that, because we're expecting that to be a few months ago.
Yeah. Just to build on that point about I've seen the Shetland Bus report, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But it's whether all those other elements are also going to be reported on, or of that suite, which ones are going to be reported on. I'm just trying to understand that.
So how do you mean?
So at the moment, there's one report which is about the Shetland Bus.
Yeah.
When will the reports be for all the other bits that are going to report? And then the extension of that is, and are there bits that aren't going to report?
Yeah, well, Innovate UK asked us to produce a report that could be publicly published on the whole project and all of the deliverables of the project. So far, they have not advised us when or if they are actually going to publish it. So I'm kind of waiting to see what they're doing, and we might choose to just do that ourselves because we have produced a report that was aimed to be public facing, which they asked for, and then the last time I asked them about it, they sort of said, "Oh, we're not sure." What we're doing with that. So it's a good question. Yeah.
When did you put the chargers in for the electric refuse lorry? My understanding is now you won't be able to put the charger that size in Orkney until after the new business commission.
Yeah. We got it in it's at the abattoir, and that's one of the great legacies of the project is that we've got that. I think it's 160. I think it's a 160 kilowatt charger. So we put that in. I guess it was just under 2 years ago.
Right, so that's before they put the restriction on. The thing is, the one thing that anybody that's thinking on anything like this needs to be aware of, you don't get an electricity supply that size until the new substations commissioned. So that's the point. There's a 2-year gap before you could do anything like that. You can't think, I'll do one next year because you don't get an electricity supply.
Yeah, well, it's interesting also the point in the clip of Craig there as well, that was a key learning, is that on the one hand, while you can get a charger that big, whether or not you want to wait a little bit for the technology with the vehicles to change, so maybe you don't need a charger that big, because things like the standing charge on that, just to have that charger operational was a huge amount, something like £800 a month. So it was a really expensive standing charge on it, and and also, as you say, the grid capacity, all of that. It's so if your vehicle technology moves on enough that you don't need such a powerful charger to drive it, then it would be better, make it more cost effective, but also more viable in terms of grid upgrades, because that was the big issue when modelling and looking at how you could have routes around Orkney, and particularly Shetland with their geography, the routes for use of electric buses all the way up to the north and south of Shetland, and also with their hills as well, with how hilly it is, was a real challenge, because by the very nature of these more rural places, as you'll know, the grid is. That's the question.
The question. Did you look at the options for using local energy storage to reduce your network capacity required for a charger?
We did look at that at the feasibility stage, but the locations that councils chose to put in the chargers when they were doing the actual trials didn't require that, so that wound up not being part of what we were doing, and part of it also was just the time frame. It was only a 21-month project initially, so we had a real challenge and around, so we didn't want to give ourselves too huge a challenge in terms of dealing with the DNOs and things with what we tried to do, but we did look at that in the feasibility stage, and that would be a good option.
I started working in projects in 2010 for SSE in King, and I worked for 7 years. And the one thing that we found in every single project we ever did, well, the biggest problem was that the projects were time limited by somebody deciding before you even start the project, this is a 2-year project, this is a 4-year project, or whatever. And you get to the point where you think, great, we found out 50%, now we can fix the other 50%, but we can't because we've got to write a report. So we see what we can do. And to me, that is losing the country millions of pounds every year, and blowing down at the rate at which we develop. And if you were a smart investor in a private business, you just would not do that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say, we've done half the job, time's up, we're going to stop.
Yeah.
We're going to wait another year and look for another funding source, or we start again.
Yeah.
You crack on and you get the job done. So where we are, if we didn't have that stupid, and I really do think it's a stupid system. I mean, it's being late.
Yeah.
Not put a limit on it. What's the limit on it?
Yeah.
You can have £5 million to do that. If it takes you 7 years or 12 years, doesn't matter. If you want more money, that's what you've got, and then we can see about it. But don't stop projects at a time. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, the time frame was very challenging, and the thing was, Net Zero Living program, when they launched the program, knew that it was a tight time frame, but it was within that 5-year spending review. So that was the window of opportunity. And it was interesting because at the end of the program, we were having discussions about lessons learned and being questioned about it. For me, one of the key learnings we had was around the challenge of requiring these projects to have local authority partners, which then brings in all the procurement timeframes. It gave every project a challenge on time. But then my colleagues who were in the councils, they said, on the one hand, that for them, that was a nightmare because they were personally trying to project manage that. But they said, on the other hand, it actually got things done at a pace that you normally wouldn't be able to do as a local authority, because it was a use it or lose it with them getting that money, and so people pushed to get things done. So
African councils aren't getting on with the job, not because it's the right thing to do to put a time limit on it.
No, but it's just that's when we had the money. The government had set the money for the funding for, so that's what we had to work with.
That's good points, Martin.
Yeah.
But on Thursday, probably get those.
Just thinking of you were talking about the barriers that get in the way.
Yeah.
So if you go for a model like in Orkney of charging hubs, thinking of bus services,
yeah,
are you going to end up having to rethink? Like at the moment, everything radiates out of Kirkwall. Would you have to go for a different system with, like circular routes centred on other places? Does it need that sort of radical change to work with it all?
In Orkney, you wouldn't need to because the distances aren't big enough, and that's what we found with the trial. That wouldn't be a problem as long as you've got a bus with a long enough range. Then that's not going to be an issue. In Shetland, they would need at the far north and south points of the route, they would need to potentially stop and have their lunch break and charge the bus at the same time. Charger at the moment, but that's kind of the learning.
I think it does bring it, and the number of thoughts when Alan was saying about the location of any charging, and you think of all the different services that were described there. And OREF, we've talked about this. What we need to have a view of what our future energy system looks like as a whole, and where these nodes of demand are going to be. And we had a ferry on there, and if you think of the energy that a boat's going to absorb rather than a bus, it's easily 10 times more because it's going through dense materials, etc. And that's something that ORF's canvassed for, and we did get a chance there was the Future Energy Futures project that I think we talked about when we were doing it, but I don't think we've reported back on that. And that's maybe something that we should do in ORF, because there were some really interesting findings there about where demand might be located in the future.
Yeah.
So it's a really good question. It just may not be driven by the buses. It might be driven by
other things.
Other things.
Yeah, but it's also like looking at, if you were to look at, because we were just trialing individual vehicles, we focused on those. But with the hub concept, it's also thinking about, if you're trying to get delivery companies and others to do that as well. And that's why in the hub we came up with the idea of having things like the co-working space and the cafe and the other elements that could give people something to do. So, for example, if you're a care worker and you're working out in the community, you can stop and charge your car, or work on your computer in the co-working space to do paperwork, grab a bite of lunch, and then your car's charged and off you go. So it can be a bit of productive time for people. And that was kind of the idea with the hub is looking at that. But also, if you're looking particularly for HGV charging, you'd really want to be doing further modelling work with private companies as well that use them. So you get the usage of those chargers up as much as possible.
So one little thing.
Go on, Martin.
Standing charge on bigger supplies is based partly on how much electricity used between time in the morning, like 8 o'clock in the morning and 6 at night in winter. And if you can avoid that, you can cut it down. But if you can cut your demand down in that period, you can effectively cut down your standing charge. And so it's worthwhile thinking about only charging at night. Charging during the day, like an one car, is going to cost you a lot more in terms of capacity for the electricity supply. So I would go for charging when the bus stops at 10 o'clock at night and it charges for 8 hours till 6 in the morning. When it starts, that's where you get the better prices on. If it's buying on the half-hour spot market, you'll get better prices then as well. And capacity-wise, you'll save a lot of money.
Yeah. Excellent. I think unless we've got any other questions, what we'll maybe do is bring that to a close. So Anna, thank you very much indeed for sharing with us what you've done. An incredible job in a couple of years. And I'll embarrass you by saying that everybody that worked with Anna really, really appreciated the way she managed the project, because she did a brilliant job to get all the project through in the time you did. So well done, Anna.